Hi, welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. Well, as I've said before, we live in interesting times. As I've also said before, interesting times can be dangerous times, and they're getting more interesting and more dangerous with each passing day. We've all been watching what's happening in the last few days up in Washington as they get ready for the inauguration of the next president. As I was watching some of the news footage coming through, uh, I remarked to Kelly. We were sitting in here in the front room this morning. She had just made one of her amazing omelets that when I get done, I feel like I've eaten a Christmas dinner. But when I saw the troops uh, lined up, and not that troops aren't brought in to these things in other situations. But this is a unique situation, as everybody understands. And I told her that it had all the makings of a Kent State. Well, Kelly's quite a bit younger than I am, and she wasn't familiar with Kent State. Many of you were. Many of you are up around my age, but many of you may not be if you're a little bit younger. And Kent State harkens back to another volatile time in our history, a time of great protests and great riots, uh, when the country really was torn between two radically opposing views. It's when our left, as we see it here in our country today, really started taking a physical foothold in the daily life of our country. To give you a little bit of background, and then I'm going to skip forward to this. Many of you will remember, those of you who don't remember, you're about to hear that during the 60s there was a great uprising against our involvement in Vietnam. And I won't go into, I spent about an hour talking about this with Kelly this morning, and I won't go into all the reasons, but a lot of protests, riots, sit-ins occurred, and this was also Marxist driven across the country, beginning mainly at college campuses and then spreading out. Now, interestingly enough, the reason that we're in the big problem we're in nowadays is that those people who were rioting and protesting back then as college students are now the college professors and administrators that are driving so many of these insane policies that we see around here, and also responsible for filling all the young heads full of drivel when they come out of college. That's why we have so many people who don't understand the dangers of Marxism and the importance of the way our country was founded, the importance of our traditional values, and the importance of capitalism. Uh, that's why so many people in Congress don't understand it now. We live in a world filled with uneducated or miseducated people. Anyway, going back to I think that Kent State happened in 1970, but starting in about 78, the riots started. Those were race riots, and then it turned into riots against and demonstrations against the war in Vietnam. That's a whole other subject that we could talk about. Maybe sometime we will, but not today. um, the America was so unused to that kind of civil unrest that they called out the National Guard, just like we're seeing in so many places now. Um, and at Kent State, which is in Ohio, if any of you have heard the Neil Young song Ohio, that's what it's about. Um, National Guardsmen showed up, and you can read for yourself what happened. But as a result of the National Guard being called up and the demonstrators, the protesters, being very, very energetic in their protests, and the National Guardsmen being young men of 19 and 20, many of whom were in the Guard because they didn't want to be drafted into the regular Army and get sent to Vietnam. It got kind of jumpy, and four young people were killed by the National Guard. This has all of the markings of something that could result in that. It could happen anywhere. It could happen because of the inflammatory accusations being dispersed around by the media and certain members of Congress, laying blame at the right. And we know, if you've seen the video, that it was actually left-wing interlopers that came in and caused most of the problems. But this could escalate. This could escalate quickly. I've said before in previous ones that as we further devolve in our decline of our society, and as our separation continues to grow between those who feel of different ways, things can flash quickly. They can come on you anywhere, anytime before you know it. We hope that it doesn't happen up in Washington this time. Well, I'm sure there are some who hope that it does, but I'm not one of those. And we should all hope that during this part, especially, that nothing flashes, but it could. Now, this brings us back to what should we be thinking about individually. I just put up a video over on Patreon. It will probably stay over on Patreon because I talked about alternative or environmental weapons. I explained that when I taught martial arts in my system, the system that I designed, I made it an inclusive and an all-enveloping system so as to allow the practitioner to be able to deal with the very low intensity situation, a problem at a company picnic, clear on up through firearms and deadly force. But because at that time, believe it or not, and when I put together the system, most states did not have concealed carry. And so I taught my students other methods short of firearms to be able to defend themselves. If you're interested in that, go on over to Patreon, and I'll try to put the link to that specific video here below. I always have a link to my Patreon channel, but I'm not that smart when it comes to this stuff, but I'll try to put that specific link down there. If it doesn't take you, just get on Patreon and look it up. I'm sure you'll be able to find it, but that can be fairly important. Everybody out there, first off, needs to be ready with basic preparedness. And we know what that means, and we've talked about it forever, and it's not just me. There's hundreds of people on here that talk about basic preparedness. And that is essentially, make sure all of your tanks are topped off. Make sure you have extra fuel. If you're running propane, make sure you have plenty extra of that. Make sure that you're well stocked with food and water, and all those other little niceties that you don't want to go without for a while, simply so that you don't have to go out on the road, out on the street, if you don't want to, for, who knows how long, couple of days, couple of weeks. It could you want to be able to be self-sustaining for a good long time. Those of us who lived through that time of unrest, through the riots and things, realize and we remember how dicey things can get. And just because you may not be living in what you would consider to be a bad area doesn't mean that it can't come out and touch you in a hurry. It can. So make sure that you're well stocked. Probably we won't have anything flash too badly until Inauguration Day. So you got a few days, but, write the things down that you need, go out and get them in the house, so that if all you want to do for a while is sit home and watch the news, and I do suggest that, then you can. Now, as far as watching the news, that is important. I don't watch the news much. anymore because it's pretty much the same thing. But in a time like this, it's simply a matter of basic intelligence. And I don't mean intelligence being smart, but I mean information coming in. Make sure that you are monitoring both national and local news. That national situation is going to drive the local situation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be hand in hand. Sometimes something may be going on nationally and nothing going on, locally with you. Other times, maybe it seems like it simmered down nationally, but something made it flare up close to you, and you want to be aware of that. You want to stay on top of that. So make sure that you have good information flow coming in, and then of course check the other sources here online to make sure that you're abreast of the latest information. That's very important. Secondly, make sure that you have good communications with your family and with your people. Be in good contact. Let everybody know where you are, where you're going to be at any time. And keep track of where the rest of your family is going to be. This isn't a matter of, I don't need to tell anybody what I'm doing. It's a matter of safety. Let people know where you are, when you intend to be there, when you intend to leave, when you intend to be home. Because if you get you get in a crack, you want somebody to start thinking about wonder what Johnny's doing. He should be home by now. Let's start looking out the window. If he's not out there, can we get a hold of him on his phone? Stay in good, constant contact with your team, with your family, and with your friends. Make sure, and I'm sure everybody here does, make sure that you have your means of self-defense close at hand. If you need to be carrying a little extra stuff, carry a little extra stuff. I do suggest you go over, if you're not over already on Patreon, go on over there and pick up a few little morsels from me over there on that one. Cost you $1, and it's a lot less than I used to charge people to take from me. And if you don't like it, you can just quit next month after having your dollar's worth, but it'll fit you. Hopefully you want to, won't want to. We have a pretty good time over there. Got some good folks over there, and you'll learn from those people as well. As we get into this situation more deeply, it's going to get more and more serious, and so we will be talking about more and more serious things on Patreon. That's really where you want to be if you're serious about what's going on in your preparedness levels, and maybe some things you haven't thought about or want to tighten up on. So with those things in mind, we're going to see, I think, a time coming up that, while it may not be unprecedented, it certainly hasn't been seen here for quite a while. And maybe it is unprecedented. Now, there are those who say, how horrible things are compared to how they used to be, and how politics has gotten so rotten and so dirty. I would suggest, if you think that, go back and really read some of the stories of the founding of our country and politics through the years. And you'll find that politics hasn't changed very much at all. It has always been rotten, and it has always been dirty. And we simply have kind of our heroes that we think are good, and we tend to dismiss those people and those stories that we think were not. But it has always been a dirty, rotten game that most people would rather not be a part of. But if to where I said a second ago, it may be unprecedented in that back the last time something like this really happened on a national level, which was 1970 or then the early 70s. And you can even go back to the Democrat convention in Chicago in 1968, where you had so much rioting. But our country was not as divided back then, nor did a certain group have such a stranglehold on the information that was out there. Now, we have a lot of channels, a lot of cable channels. We have a lot of the new media of You know the ones I'm talking about, right? Uh, but back then we only had three channels. You know, we had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and that was about it. And you had 30 minutes of news in the evening, and that was about it. And all three of them said the same thing, because even back then they were all on the same team, and they were wanting to make sure that they were driving the agenda and telling the American people what to think. Well, we are now more deeply committed to that, simply because our own personal communications are now wrapped up in it. We're not the passive receiver of news, but we are intimately involved in that web of information, to where we rely on these methods of finding out information and then sending information ourselves. So nowadays, I would say that it's probably going to be a larger problem, because our country as a people are more drastically divided. There is more violence out there being promoted by the left. Uh, Violence against anybody who is, and you can see this, and it gets worse every day now. Violence against people on the right. And so if that's you, you got to really start being careful and being ready to respond. Um, I think that's probably um, the main thing. We don't really need to get fancier with that. I'm going to be making one here on the next few days. I might wait until after the election, about what's going to happen in the cities. And what's going to happen in the cities um, is going to affect everybody else. And I come at that from a guy with a lot of experience in the cities. I was a city guy. I was a city cop. I was a city undercover. I know the city very well. I've seen it disintegrate from the cities back in the 70s, the 60s, and the 70s, and even the 80s to an extent. It was a good place to be. Wasn't all that bad, wasn't all that dangerous. It was where the energy was. It was the financial engine of the country. The cities were, um, but they have dissolved and devolved into something that's unrecognizable as to what they originally were, and they're a great danger to those around them. So I'm going to be talking about that. Maybe wait till after the election, maybe right. We'll just kind of see. I know I've got several more to do between now and that one, but for now, realize that things can get pretty dicey pretty quick. They can be very dangerous. It can flash on you without warning. It can come at any time. You don't have to be in the city to be in danger. You just have to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you never know when you're at the wrong place or when the wrong time is. So remember that history is full of sad stories of people who weren't paying attention or weren't prepared, and each of us has the responsibility for ourselves and those who depend on us to be prepared, to be informed, to be ready at any and all times, so that we can continue and try to rebuild what we have seen falling around us for all too long. So good luck to all of you. Remember, what we say is that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. No time is that more important than right now. Preparing well, being thoughtful, understanding what's going on, being well informed, and checking that. It's like the old Santa Claus. Make that list and check it twice. Make sure that if you got any holes that need to be filled, you get them filled in, because now's the time not to have any holes. So you all have a good day, and I will be back and talk to you probably tomorrow. Bye-bye.